Hey everybody, it's PartyElite, and today we're taking a look at the Iron Oath. This was one of the standout demos I played during Steam Next Fest back at the end of February, and it immediately piqued my interest with its beautiful art style, surprisingly visceral elements, and top-notch writing. If you're a fan of tactical RPGs in the vein of Battle Brothers or Wartales, the Iron Oath is another to add to your list of contenders, as it takes a similar formula and adds its own spin to it, introducing a narrative component, personal stakes, and compelling new mechanics. As we dive into today, I just want to mention, as always, if you like what you see, don't hesitate to wishlist the game on Steam, as it really helps indie devs out, especially with visibility on the platform. And hey, if you like this video or have any questions or thoughts of your own, don't hesitate to let me know down below. Now, with no more time to waste, let's dive on in. Engaging characters. At the heart of a game like this is, of course, the characters. They need to be visually and functionally varied, they need to be mechanically compelling across a variety of types of situations, and you need to grow attached to them, investing in their growth and fearing for their survival as a result. The Iron Oath strives for, and in my humble opinion, accomplishes exactly that. As you get thrown into the world of Calum, the first narrative beats have you immediately fighting for survival, and the Iron Oath makes it very clear right off the bat that it pulls no punches. You learn very quickly that the members of your party can and will die, even when you think they might be safe. The opening moments, for example, will determine if your party starts full of past accomplices from before the game begins, or should you perform poorly if your party starts completely empty because everybody died. This is just the opening of the game, mind you. So, as you go around from city to city, diving into various inns to see who might be looking for a job, you'll want to make sure you're developing a well-rounded party that synergizes well and has ample opportunity for substitutions when needed. And when I speak of synergy, it applies beyond their abilities on the battlefield. Each character has a slew of stats, some of which can be upgraded when they level up, and each of these stats impacts their abilities and behaviors in various ways. The class of the character determines which of these stats impacts things like their attack, damage, or critical hit chances, and if you're familiar with systems like D&D or Pathfinder, that won't be a foreign concept. The idea is that a spellcaster, for example, relies more on, say, their wisdom than brute strength, whereas a melee combatant needs their strength, a ranged combatant might need strength and dexterity in equal measure, so different characters will have different main stats that you'll want to focus on and buff when they level up, while their other stats will provide alternative benefits like hit points out of Constitution. Each class of character will also have access to different types of abilities. Though the characters are largely categorized into melee class, ranged class, support, so on and so forth, the class names themselves are flavored to the world, and the spread of their abilities makes them all compelling in their own ways. Everybody is able to deal damage, sure. Some are reliant on moving enemies or themselves around on the battlefield. Some can set traps or engage along specific patterns of tiles, taking on multiple enemies with one action. Each has its use, and each has a set of abilities which you can swap options in and out of as the missions at hand deem necessary. You can also level these abilities up when the characters gain enough XP, allowing them to be used more times in a mission, or otherwise making them more powerful or efficient. Gear works as you might expect, with durability and quality and stats to concern yourself with, and you're able to loot or purchase gear in order to get buffs to defensive and offensive capabilities, as well as various types of utility. Traits, meanwhile, provide all sorts of effects. Some influence stats, others impact what sorts of actions any one particular character might like or dislike, and others still determine how stats might be affected when the character reaches their peak age. At times, you'll want to make sure you're bringing compatible people into a mission, since you don't want to be constantly upsetting half the people you're working with simply because you have to make a decision that displeases one half but pleases the other. Ensuring personalities synergize will make sure your people stay loyal, and if they stay loyal and you're able to keep paying them their salaries and renewing their contracts, they'll stay with you until they die. And yes, time very much has an impact here. Your mercenaries will age over time, eventually reaching that peak age of performance, and yes, time then will ultimately take them away. Before the slow grip of death, however, come the injuries they might sustain on the battlefield. They come in various shapes and sizes, these ailments, and they can cause all sorts of trouble. A hurt leg might slow down movement on the battlefield, while a damaged arm might reduce damage output. Some injuries inflict damage on the injured individual if they move around, while others cause damage to the injured party anytime they attack. Think of it like using a torn bicep to swing an axe or walking on a broken ankle. Injuries themselves are interesting, and they can worsen over time unless you bandage them. And even then, to truly heal an injury, you'll have to visit an infirmary, and sometimes it'll be months before a veteran of yours is fit to fight again. On which topic? Deadly tactical battles. The tactical battles in the Iron Oath have plenty of familiar elements if you're familiar with the genre. When battles kick off, outside of rare circumstances, you'll have the opportunity to position your party according to your composition and deployment zone. Then, every round consists of turns taken by characters as determined by their initiative, moving around the hex grid based on movement speeds and performing attacks or otherwise using abilities based on character class and the abilities you've unlocked and upgraded for them. As stated previously, every class has its place to play, and you'll find yourself engaging with mechanics like line of sight, zones of control, attacks of opportunity, terrain-related effects, status effects like flanked, slowed, bleeding, burning, so on and so forth, but it really comes down to the variety in the classes and their abilities, and the brutality and mystery of combat as well. Some classes are about mobility, others are about manipulating enemy positions to force them into dangerous terrain, others still are about manipulating allied positions to pull them out of precarious positions. Some fight from range, some fight up close, and some are best used as support to heal and buff. Apart from basic attacks, abilities are limited in their uses though, and though upgrades can add more uses to them, you'll want to make sure you don't waste them, treating them as a precious battle resource at times. Some abilities attack multiple hexes or blend movement and damage output or jump between adjacent tiles, while others take time to charge, leaving you with a choice to make about instant damage output from a weaker ability or delayed maximum carnage. Visually, they are all just absolutely stunning. I think what you're seeing on screen speaks for itself, as each ability is animated so meticulously in such a vibrant and exaggerated style. It's just fantastic. It really breaks the slower pace of turn-based tactical battles when each move ends with something so flashy, accompanied by great audio work too. What I particularly like is how little you know about your enemies until you actually see them in action. And when you see them in action, they've got really beautifully illustrated and interesting abilities of their own. There's a huge variety here too. From demons to spirits to fleshy machinations to skeletons and other humans, you'll be up against some very interesting foes, and that's just what we saw in the Next Fest demo. And when these enemies hit, they hit hard. As I said earlier, you will lose combatants at times. There's a bleed out counter, and you'll have the chance to revive fallen friends mid-battle, but the AI can be relentless, and it will do the metaphorical double tap if you let it, finishing your warriors off. The threat of death is very real, especially as you learn new threats and try to anticipate them. When not dead, though, injuries have a tendency to get in your way. As discussed earlier, some will reduce your effectiveness, some will cause you to hurt yourself, and all will need tending to as they worsen over time unless bandaged, and even then, they'll keep causing you issues unless healed at an infirmary. And injuries aren't rare either. You and your enemies are wielding dangerous weapons, and so you'll be dealing with these dangerous dice rolls quite often. It becomes a very active and persistent and present part of every tactical battle. And to that end, the enemy won't just attack your party members physically, but mentally too, hitting their spirit stat, reducing it, and causing them to take more fatigue from the mission. What happens in battle, though, you'll have the chance to recover, at least in part, from most of the consequences. Dungeon crawls and the fight against time. Between the overworld and the tactical battles lies a very interesting layer that introduces a slew of mechanics and provides challenges and narrative moments of its own. I'm not yet sure if every mission plays out like this or involves a literal subterranean adventure, but the few that were in the Next Fest demo did. though the system could work in other settings too, and I do believe these screenshots on Steam show examples of that. Either way, at some point in your missions, you'll have to pick 4 members of your party with whom to explore or advance through these randomly generated dungeons. And just to clarify, at times, these dungeons look like they will be different settings, not literal dungeons. Again, the screenshots on the Steam page seem to imply castle interiors, tundra landscapes, deserts, crypts, and more. I'm just using the term dungeon as a catch-all, referencing the old Dungeons and Dragons dungeon crawls. Now, you'll want to choose your dungeon crawling party members based on the skill level and synergies between their abilities and classes, their traits that impact how they feel about decisions you might have to make, and their fatigue level. A particularly tired individual will suffer penalties to their stats and attacks, while those who are well rested will perform better and acquire more XP too. Fatigue is accumulated at the end of a mission, but the amount of fatigue applied to each character is determined by their total spirit level at the time. The more tired individuals can opt to sit out, or they can rest at an inn to recuperate, something you'll need to balance and manage as the going gets tough, I imagine. Once you've picked out your party, you'll be able to purchase provisions using your party's money. These are a randomly generated set of options, and you'll only be able to take so many items with you, so you'll have to wisely pick between bandages that stop injuries from worsening, health and spirit potions, tools that can help tackle obstacles, and much, much more besides. With all that in place, you begin your crawl. Every action in the dungeon costs time. Whether you're moving from tile to tile or scouting ahead to spot traps, treasures, enemies, or alternative paths, every action costs time. Should you come across a point of interest, you'll often be presented with a variety of options. Do you check the chest or leave it be? Do you clear the rubble blocking the shortcut with a shovel or with bare hands? Or do you take the long route? You get the picture. At times, these options will be influenced by what provisions you're carrying, the stats of your characters, or any items you might have found in the dungeon itself, while at other times, the decisions and their impacts will influence your party members' loyalties based on their character traits. Every action you make, though, as I said earlier, costs time, and as you spend more time in the dungeon, your situation becomes more precarious. Every cycle, a new effect is added to your crawl. This might reawaken the dead, it might repopulate old battlefields, it might make you more injury-prone or make it impossible to keep watch while camping. You don't know what's coming your way, so you just have to pray to the dice gods every time a cycle ends and hope for the best. Or the least worst, as the case may be. Time becomes a resource that needs managing. Do you scout ahead to prevent ambushes early on, leaving yourself vulnerable close to the end of the dungeon? Or do you save yourself from the vagaries brought on by spending time scouting and looting? It creates a very thick atmosphere of tension at times, especially with how unforgiving the game can be in battle. Using your provisions or abilities during the crawl will also cost time, but any unused provisions are wasted, the cost of which can be partially mitigated through various upgrades. For particularly long crawls, you'll want to make camp at least once, and doing so will allow you to burn incense to apply various effects to the resting members of your party. You can choose between a short or long rest, and the difference in time cost affords you more incense points, allowing you to burn more incense to take advantage of more effects. Now, incense isn't a provision, so you don't have to worry about restocking, but you can unlock more types of incense through upgrades, and each has its own pros and cons and associated time cost. But, as I just said, only the members of your party that are actually resting will take advantage of those effects, and a short or long rest will determine which effects might apply. Some members will undoubtedly be kept awake in order to keep watch, lest you be ambushed as you sleep. Incense effects include healing hit points and spirit alike, and they also include recharging abilities. I'd mentioned in the previous section how more powerful abilities have limited charges. Well, those charges aren't just for each battle, but for each dungeon crawl. So if you thought you could just use your most powerful abilities over and over in each battle, you're sadly mistaken, unless you get the chance to make camp and use the right incense to bring some charges back. You can see how the dungeon crawl layer adds a really interesting set of mechanics to the game asking you to balance a variety of different resources and personalities to successfully make it out the other end. And once you do make it out the other end, you'll be exploring the Overworld. What connects these dungeons, their missions, and the people that perform them and ask for them to be performed in the first place is the world of Calum. Currently undergoing the start of a bit of an end times scenario, Calum is a beautiful land divided into multiple cities, landmarks, and factions. Unlike a game like Battle Brothers, where your travel between locations is entirely freeform, it seems as though the Iron Oath takes on a slightly more controlled approach, having you pick destinations to travel to specifically, and then letting you know how long the journey will take, and then taking a preordained path to get there. I'm not sure if this was just for the demo so that players didn't just go randomly exploring everywhere. Maybe the full game will take on a more freeform approach, and I'll keep my eyes out for more details on that front when they come, but as of now it seems as though a fairly controlled approach to exploration. Either way, as you move around, you'll need to manage your provisions as well as your wealth to make sure you can feed and pay your mercenary band and keep them from losing their loyalty and disbanding. You can camp at any point of time to advance time, but of course this will cost provisions, time itself, and potentially wages, though it can help your warriors recuperate before or after a particularly grueling crawl. Ideally, your party will be able to sacrifice the unforgiving ground and outdoors for the much more comfortable options at a nearby inn. Cities around Calum have status effects that might make them more or less worth visiting, but the key reasons to enter a city include recruitment, rest, and revelry at the inn, the purchase and sale of goods at the marketplace, healing at the infirmary, or seeking out quests provided by the factions present at the city. Performing these quests will provide you with money, affinity with the faction that you did it for, and points to spend on company upgrades. These upgrades cover a plethora of options across a plethora of sections. Some will increase the likelihood of certain items appearing for provisions. Some will improve the effects of resting at an inn. Some will increase the durability of gear. Some will allow you to take on more missions at the same time. As you can see on screen, there are lots of options, and you can really customize your party and your band as you wish. The Overworld isn't just about picking up quests then. It's about improving your band of mercenaries in various ways, it's about exploring a large, fantastical world, and it's also about engaging in quests. Some that tie into the greater end times narrative, some that tie into much more personal character narratives, and others that prepare you for the challenge ahead. The Iron Oath immediately caught my eye when I saw it during Steam Next Fest, and playing even its relatively short demo showcased so much good quality stuff. Its narrative approach means you'll be driven to see each playthrough to its end. The writing is solid, the art style is gorgeous, the music and sound effects are on point, all the abilities and classes are compelling. It's looking like a very neat package. I'm really excited to check out the game when it comes out later this year, and if you're interested in following along or keeping up with more strategy, sim, and tactical RPG gaming in general, don't hesitate to subscribe. Again, don't forget to wishlist the game on Steam if you like what you see, as it really helps indie devs out with visibility on the platform, and it's a good way to show some love and support. If you have any thoughts or questions of your own, drop them in the comments down below. As always, a massive thanks goes out to all of the channel members and patrons who've been supporting the channel on a monthly basis. They'll keep us alive and running smoothly, and of course, a big ol' thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.